and thruster issues. Bay Area Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a ranking member of the House Science, Space and Technology Committee, issued a joint statement with Congressman Eric Sorensen saying, quote, "We commend NASA and Boeing's commitment to prioritizing safety. We thank astronauts Wilmore and Williams for their heroic teamwork, patience and flexibility on the crew flight test mission, and we look forward to their safe return home. The concerning events leading to today's decision, however, must be understood and addressed." Boeing released a statement saying it continues to focus first and foremost on the safety of the spacecraft.
Here we are in the front of the International Space Station.
NASA says the two astronauts will have plenty of supplies to last till February. As for the Starliner, NASA says the empty capsule will head back to Earth likely in early September. But NASA leaders say they anticipate the Starliner will fly with a crew again in the future. The SpaceX Crew 9 flight is scheduled to lift off on September 24th from Florida. In Mountain View, Marianne Favreau, NBC Bay Area News.
John F. Kennedy. Bobby and I will fight together to defeat the corrupt political establishment and return control of this country to the people.
RFK Jr. says he would have won the election if the system was more honest.
I got a call from the president, and we talked. We had a very good talk. And then he invited me to come see him. And we talked about, not about the things that separate us, because we don't agree on everything, but on the values and the issues that bind us together. And one of the issues that he talked about was having safe food and ending the chronic disease epidemic. Our children are now the unhealthiest, sickest children in the world. Don't you want healthy children? And don't you want the chemicals out of our food? Don't you want the regulatory agencies to be free from corporate corruption? That's what President Trump told me that he wanted.
Kennedy added this is not the Democratic Party of his uncle and father. Lisa?
Thank you, Lucas. I feel like I should start. Should we start calling him Bobby? Make it look like we're on the first name basis.
Yeah.
Jason, okay, so the Trump campaign put out a memo after this talking about, you look at states like Arizona, if you looked at the 2020 turnout model, the net vote gained in Arizona would be over 41,000 votes, 4 times Biden's margin in 2020. How significant is this endorsement?
Oh, I think it's very significant. I think it tells us a lot about the Democratic Party of today. Did you ever think you'd see a Democratic Party that was rejecting a Kennedy, for goodness sake? And the idea that a Kennedy would join forces with a Donald Trump, I think it's a big deal. He wasn't going to get the majority of the votes, but he's probably going to get that last 5%. The people are disaffected maybe by both parties that feel a little offended by how Democrats ran their process in nominating somebody. It wasn't a fair fight. They sued Kennedy every single chance they could get. They kept him off the ballot. They did not allow him to participate in a fair way. And there's a lot of people that are offended by that. So that last 5%, the bit that actually makes the difference in an election, I think this is a huge win for Donald Trump that will translate in November.
Jason, you touched upon the realignment in American politics. And Cheryl, I want to get to you after we listen to why RFK Jr. decided to endorse Donald Trump. Let's take a listen.
Don't you want a president who's going to get us out of the wars and who's going to rebuild the middle class in this country? And he told me that he wanted to end the censorship because the whole basis of American democracy is the free flow of information. Can you think of any time that you can look back in history and say that the people who were censoring were the good guys? They're always the bad guys, because it's always the first step down that slippery slope to totalitarianism. Don't you want a president who's going to protect America's freedoms? And I want to ask you again, don't you want a safe environment for your children? And don't you want a president that's going to make America healthy again? Thank you all very, very much, and God bless you, and God bless America.
So he talks about how the Democratic Party has now left behind working class voters. Now it's about censorship, corruption, big pharma, big everything. We've seen this realignment in American politics where the Republican Party has kind of become the party of the working class, the left now the party of elites. So how does a Kennedy endorsing a Republican sort of further solidify that realignment?
Well, I think it kind of goes with what we're already seeing with the Trump campaign. If you look at the UAW, for instance, you may have the leadership of the union support Kamala Harris, but the membership is a completely different story. And we've seen that that's going to be the vote that's likely going to go Republican. But, the Wall Street Journal editorial board made a really good comment, a line about kind of why you saw this rejection by the Democrats of RFK Jr. and Nicole Shanahan. I mean, they believe that the campaign, the Democrats played dirty politics to keep them suppressed. A Kennedy, to both of your points. And what they write, I think this is interesting. He says, Democrats can now blame themselves, the editorial board writes, for the endorsement, since Mr. Kennedy might have dropped out and not endorsed another candidate. So if Arizona and Georgia in particular, if the story changes because of RFK's position now with the Trump campaign, they only have themselves to blame.
Well, and talking about that dirty politics, Tom, I thought, RFK Jr. had this zinger, in my opinion, where he's talking about how Biden mocked Putin's 88% landslide and mocked the fact that Putin owns the Russian press and that he kept opponents off the ballot. And then you've got the DNC doing what they've been doing, and the Biden campaign or Democrats trying to push Trump off the ballot before.
Yeah,
so
it's a very interesting number. What did you say? 88%.
That was with Putin's landslide in the Russian election.
Well, that 88% is alarmingly similar to the percentage of mainstream media that is actively supporting the Democrats. We saw that they did a study this week that the media is somewhere around 85% positive stories for Kamala, 85% negative stories for Trump. So they're actively campaigning for the Democrats at this point. And so when RFK talks about press freedom, it's in the same breath as talking about the First Amendment, about people's ability to express themselves and to say what they need to. At this point, the Democratic Party believes that freedom of the press is the freedom of the press to censor us, because the press is right now in with big tech, and they're deciding what can and can't be said about things. The second big thing RFK is on about is medical freedom. So medical freedom and freedom of the press. I don't know what I want him to be in charge of, the FCC or the CDC, but put him in charge of one of them.
And let's get them. All right.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.
The troubled Starliner had two major problems: helium leaks and thruster issues. Bay Area Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren, a ranking member of the House Science, Space and Technology Committee, issued a joint statement with Congressman Eric Sorensen saying, quote, "We commend NASA and Boeing's commitment to prioritizing safety. We thank astronauts Wilmore and Williams for their heroic teamwork, patience and flexibility on the crew flight test mission, and we look forward to their safe return home. The concerning events leading to today's decision, however, must be understood and addressed." Boeing released a statement saying it continues to focus first and foremost on the safety of the
pretty good.
spacecraft.
Listen, my heart goes out to these two astronauts who packed for, I think it was like a 6-day mission or something like that. But they've been stuck there, and now they're going to be stuck there until next year. How did they come into such a predicament?
But NASA
yeah, that 8-day mission has blown out to an 8-month mission, which is always you feel for them. And this all had to do with the faults of the thruster systems on board the Starliner capsule. So Starliner is the capsule that Boeing built to essentially taxi the Boeing aside. That was not what into the space station. But during it does show launch, they had a few issues. They thought they solved it after launch, as it was headed, new companies growing the space station. They had a number of services fail. Space helium, which is kind of the fuel that goes through it, leak. Now, there's lots of redundancy.
So if this was meant to be an 8-day mission on the ISS,
a lot of
must
rework
be a little
and configuration as they were trying to dock and
Am I right to presume that? I mean, what happens with
station?
food? What happens with space?
Once they got there, NASA and Boeing said, well, we'll two missions going on. It's going on. One that has 4 and a Russian-led one that has 3. But there's always an American and Russian on either or to operate their equipment. So 5 of them failed. The space station can they've gotten a few of those failure ones back they've done it in a push. The biggest worry has always been why did these fail and how can they predict and prevent to go up failing? Because if they were to come back down mission to rotate out, it would actually really literally catastrophic. Now, NASA always at the end of the day contingencies. They had extra supplies when they went up this Boeing crew. Maybe not 2 months worth, but they were able to borrow supplies essentially from the other crew and use that.
This must be
and then have
a
resupply missions. In fact, a resupply mission
given their
led by Russia just went up to the space station about a week ago. Look, it's an interesting one because Boeing and SpaceX were so they've been able to work and shuffle things. There's only a limit to how much shuffling you can do. And there's also a practical limit because there's only so many docks. They were neck and neck on the space station, and the Boeing Starliner essentially blocking up one of those docks. It's like a Boeing plane blocking its departures all the way back. Well, it changes the planes and flights afterward, and that's what's happening here. So they really need that Boeing capsule to get out of the way. That is the new one. The new SpaceX capsule could arrive and business resume as normal. When they're on now, because there's been a ton of shuffling to get. So it's already been massively delayed.
Given as you've explained that these technical problems were only found after the launch, what does this then mean for future missions?
Obviously, NASA's priority was the safety of astronauts. Literally, almost that's the only thing that mattered because consequences they have a the Boeing aside that was ground that they're worried about testing, but it does show just how quickly they can't solve it on that either. So the question is this a random fault that has happened, growing, or is this almost a more of a system and malfunction? SpaceX is now become the partner of choice. Now that's going to be the critical case because that's going to determine the pathway forward.
So if this was meant to be an 8-day mission
they can get
on
the
the
capsule down uncrewed relatively without risk. So this is one of the big decisions by not forcing someone to go in there. They can get that capsule down to study it more, and if something goes wrong, so there's usually always 2 missions going on. There's no one on board that has 4. Then they have to figure out, well, are we going to have to require entirely an American and Russian design? That's going to be at least months, if not over a year. So the space station can house. Then they'll need some sort of testing and certification that those thrusters work again. So they have to somewhat repeat this test flight process, intended to go up draw it out more. So you're not looking of Boeing being able to carry passengers in this at least until towards the end of 2026, not later. They had extra supplies when they went up this Boeing crew. Doesn't want to keep maybe not 2 months pumping and supporting the program, but they were able to borrow. Do they get with another company? Do they just use SpaceX? NASA's always used multiple groups, and then have resupplied missions. In the case of something like this, if something goes wrong, and there are other competitors out there. So just a lot of the space policy decisions that are starting to happen supplies to the space station throughout the year. So they've been able to work and shuffle things, but there's only a limit to how much shuffling you can do. And there's also a practical limit because there's only so many docks on the space station, and the Boeing Starliner's essentially blocking up one of those docks. It's like a delayed plane blocking a departure gate. Well, it changes the planes and flights afterward, and that's what's happening here. So they really need that Boeing capsule to get out of the way so the new one, the new SpaceX capsule, could arrive and business resume as normal, because there's been a ton of shuffling to get this to work.
Well, given as you've explained that these technical problems were only found after the launch, what does this then mean for future missions?
So this is, quite literally almost the billion-dollar question, because they have a capsule on the ground that they've been testing and mimicking the faults. They can't solve it on that either. So the question is this a random fault that has happened, or is this almost more of a system and malfunction requiring a new design? Now, that's going to be the critical case, because that's going to determine the pathway forward. Now, they can get the capsule down uncrewed relatively without risk. So this is one of that big decisions. By not forcing someone to go in there, they can get that capsule down to study it more. And if something goes wrong, which is unlikely, but if it still does, there's no one on board. Then they have to figure out, well, are we going to have to require an entirely, rework and design? That's going to be at least months, if not over a year worth of fixes. Then they'll need some sort of testing and certification that those thrusters work again. So they have to somewhat repeat this test flight process, which then will draw it out more. So you're not looking of Boeing being able to carry passengers in this at least until towards the end of 2026, if not later. And this depends on what NASA decides to do. Does it want to keep pumping and supporting the program more? Do they go with another company? Do they just use SpaceX? NASA's always wanted multiple groups, just in the case of something like this, if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And there are other competitors out there. So there's a lot of then policy decisions that are starting to happen throughout the year.